Hey everybody, Ben here again. I wanted to do another video this week. This one's going to be a little bit different. I really wanted to talk in light of recent news, current events, about the Mario 64 sale on Heritage Auctions for $1.5 million, as well as my general thoughts about games, speculative investment, the idea of value in games, and things like that. We're really heading into a very strange time for the hobby. I've been collecting games for a very long time, and there's never been such crazy interest, especially on the higher end, for games like there is right now. The money we're talking about here it's the same kind of money that Hannes Wagner baseball cards go for, the T206 or whatever. It's the type of money that a Barry Bonds 70 home run ball goes for, or other sort of very hard to find high end collectibles that are owned by very wealthy people. So as someone who's actually been in the hobby for a while, who owns a lot of this stuff, who's seen a lot and touched a lot, I just wanted to give my 2 cents on the whole thing. And if you're a collector now and you're not sure what this means to you, maybe some of my thoughts can help illuminate that. If you like this stuff, please like, comment, and subscribe. This is a new type of video for me. I took some notes here. I just felt like I had a lot of thoughts, so I just wanted to get into it. So just to recap, there's a website. You can check them out. It's Heritage Auctions. They sell high-end collectible merchandise. I believe not just video games, but other stuff too. And they sold a copy of Mario 64 that was graded by WADA, which is a certifying and grading company. They basically say how pristine your game is, for $1.56 million, which set a record. This was only a few days ago. Today is July 15th. And then a few days earlier before that, an early variant of The Legend of Zelda on NES sold for $870K, which was also extraordinarily high. This is just beyond collecting games, what's going on with this stuff, these kinds of hikes in price from maybe the 5 figures to the 7 figures doesn't really happen. People ask me about this stuff all the time. What do I think? And that's why I want to do this video. So just to give, for those who, maybe haven't been watching the channel, they just, came upon this video, let me say who I am and why I have some validity to my opinions and experiences. So I started collecting in the late 90s. I'm in my late 30s. When I got my N64, that was probably around 1997 or so. It wasn't when it was brand new. I got the system and I got Mario 64 as one of the games. Around that time when I got that, that's when I sort of started getting into collecting, and I was going back to the yard sales and flea markets and buying NES games and SNES games, which people didn't really care about at the time. I remember I would go to old video stores, clean out their inventory, yard sales, whatever, and I'd pay like 25 cents a game. That's how I really built my collection. I've really bought and sold and traded actively, recently for the past 5 years in terms of a serious way, going out buying big lots of games, being willing to spend large amounts of money on lots, some to keep, some to trade or flip. When the longer I collected, as I built this collection, as things changed, I found that to be the only way to actually build a collection and get the things I needed, because things have just gone up in price. Even before stuff like this Mario 64 sale, games were inflating in price dramatically over the last few years. And even before that, people started catching on to game collecting as a hobby. My life, as someone in my late 30s, is pretty much aligned with video game culture and the growth of console gaming. I got my NES in like 87, 88. I was 4 or 5 years old. It was one of the first toys I really wanted, and I kept playing them throughout the years. I've seen it all, really, in terms of the modern hobby. I want to give a few disclaimers to some of these opinions. First, I don't want this video to seem like I'm being negative towards people who resell or flip games or get games graded or anything like that. I know that if I had a sealed copy of Mario 64, I would get it graded, and I would sell it for any price I could get it for. This is life-changing money, and anybody who holds one of these pieces that is looking to make a quick buck, at the expense of some rich guy, I'm all for it. These resellers are doing exactly what the market is asking for right now. There are people in the hobby who all they want to do, and I'm talking very high-end people, not average people who make an average income. I'm talking people who are probably worth millions of dollars, are buying and collecting and trading among themselves, because this isn't something an average person does, these six-figure and up games. And you can see people's videos out there where they build, like, their collection, so to speak, is maybe 20 sealed and graded WATA games from the 80s and 90s. These resellers and flippers are doing exactly what the market wants. These people are willing to spend the money, and these products exist out there, so they're selling them up. I also don't have a crystal ball. You know, I don't know what's going to happen. All my opinions are just sort of my best guess, or my insight on it. So if you haven't already figured it out, regarding the Mario 64 price that sold for $1.5 million, the price is frankly just too high in the abstract. Zelda, the one that sold at 870K sale, is more rare, and it went for about half. So that variant of Zelda is definitely harder to find sealed than a 9.8 Mario 64. I mean, the game's not that old. I wouldn't be shocked if there were still sealed cases of Mario 64 existing in warehouses somewhere. People find sealed N64 games all the time in warehouses through wholesalers and things like that. There are many games that are just sitting around waiting to be opened that we haven't even discovered yet. Not only that, Mario 64 is just not that rare. Here's my complete in-box copy of Mario 64 in pretty good shape, not sealed. And one thing you may notice is that this is a Player's Choice million seller. A million games is a lot, but according to my research here, 12 million copies of Mario 64 sold. 12 million copies of this game. This is hardly rare. In fact, I've got 2 copies right here just loose, sitting around, that I have ready to trade. I find so many copies of Mario 64, it's ridiculous. Even boxed. Now, I don't see sealed copies all that often, but I have touched them, I have seen them, I've seen them in stores, I've seen them in person, I've seen them at shows. They do exist. The so-called 9.8 A++ grade, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a second, I believe, personally, that unlike what some are saying, that there are other copies that exist of that condition. So I'm not really buying that it's all that rare, certainly not to 1.5 million. But what I will say about that is that it doesn't really matter what I think. I don't think it's worth $1.5 million, but all it takes is really one person to think it's worth $1.5 million in an auction and be willing to pay it up, or really more accurately, 2 people who are willing to bid against each other to get the price to that point and sell it to that point. So is it worth $1.5 million? Assuming people got paid, assuming everything went forward and it was all legitimate, which I think it is, but you never quite know. Yeah, it's probably worth that much. I just think as an investment, it's an incredibly poor investment. The game is so common. We will find more copies like this. Every game collector that has any sort of touch in the hobby, that has been into N64, is looking in their collections for their sealed copies of Mario 64. I know they exist. I know that there are collectors that you can see on YouTube that have copies of these games. They're probably sending them off to get graded, and I'm sure if they're shrewd, that they're looking to sell them right now. The money that is involved in these types of things is life-changing money. So if there's a rush to get these things, if people have maybe a perception that this thing is rarer than it is, which is why it's selling so high, you'd be foolish not to sell it right now. Other sealed copies of the game at a 9.4, which is a lower rating but still extraordinarily well, sold in the 5 figures just recently. So you wouldn't see this kind of increase in price from maybe $20,000, $30,000 to $1.5 million in other minor grading differences. If you're looking at a PSA 8 1952 Mickey Mantle to a PSA 9 52 Mickey Mantle baseball card, they're both going to sell for a lot of money. But the PSA 9 is not going to sell for 10 times or 20 times what the PSA 8 sold for. That's just not a realistic thing. So it just seems like there's awful lot of value placed in the so-called pristine nature of something that's already pretty pristine when it's sealed. There's some other weird things going about when we're talking about actual rare comps. So let's talk about some of the other games out there that are actually rare and hard to find, unlike Mario 64. You may have heard of Nintendo World Championship. So it was a competition cart. I believe 70 were made in the gray version and about maybe 20 in the gold version. And you'll have to correct me if I'm inaccurate on that. I think there's some speculation as to how many actually exist. But these are obviously very, very hard to find. They're made specifically for a competition, for a specific purpose, and they're just not that many. These items don't sell for what the Mario 64 sold for. According to my notes here, one is a gold cart right now is listed on eBay for $2 million and it's not selling. It was actually previously listed for $1 million, and I suspect that in light of the recent sales, they decided to just raise their price. But the item still hasn't sold. That gold Nintendo World Championships cart is probably about as rare as any possible video game you could find, and it just hasn't sold at that value. So we have to look at rarity here. Other games sold more than Nintendo World Championships as well, so there's some other inflation going on. Things like a sealed Final Fantasy 1 on NES sold for higher. You can find this out on the Heritage Auctions website. A sealed copy of Super Mario World, another game that's extraordinarily common. I mean, it literally came with SNES systems, sold for more than that. And I just don't buy that there is such a dearth of sealed copies of this game in such a marketplace that it really should be selling for that much. However, one thing I'm going to say is, there's an expression, a fool and his money are quickly parted. I think this is an example. I mean, if people don't mind wasting the money, then go for it. There's even some other comparisons that I think are a little out there. So consider the Nintendo PlayStation. You may have heard of it. It's the prototype Nintendo branded PlayStation. It could accept Super Nintendo carts and also discs. It was going to be their answer to the Sega CD and some of the other things that were out there, move them into the disc world. The prototype version, literally a one-of-a-kind item, sold for $360,000 at auction. There is no way, when you're actually talking about collectible value, that a sealed copy of Mario 64 is worth more than a Nintendo PlayStation, a one-of-a-kind historic artifact that is basically a turning point in the industry and unlike anything ever produced before in terms of the video game hobby. So anyway, if I haven't convinced you already about how I feel about the sale, the price is crazy. Don't go out, if I were you, don't go out and say, you know what, I'm going to drop tens of thousands of dollars on one of these things, thinking I can raise the price over the years, and yeah, I'm going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on this now, but it's going to be worth $1 million one day. I think that is an extremely risky proposition. So why did it sell for so much? First of all, demand drives price more than supply in the game collecting hobby. So think about games that are out there, some of the more coveted games, the games that everybody wants to buy. Super Smash Bros. On Nintendo GameCube is a great example. This is another game that sold millions and millions of copies. There are so many out there in the wild. There's a good chance if you end up buying somebody's GameCube collection, maybe you go to a yard sale, you get lucky, they have a GameCube and like 10 games, a good chance one of those games is going to be Super Smash Bros. On GameCube. And yet the game sells consistently for like $60+ used. And so it sells for a lot. There are definitely way more common GameCube games that just sell for less, but the truth is, demand drives the price. If you're going to be buying GameCube, you want Smash Brothers. The other thing about the Mario thing and why it sold for so much, I think, is sort of this perfect storm. It's this very popular IP, Mario. It's there are other similar items selling at high prices. You know, when you see Final Fantasy and Mario World and NES Mario selling for these high prices, and this other item comes out in that territory, it's just like this tidal wave of effects sort of pushing it in the right direction. The other thing that's going on right now is that there's no population reports from WATA. What is a population report? A population report says this is how many of each level grade of game that we've graded a particular thing. So if you send a baseball card into PSA, you can find out how many PSA 9 grades a specific baseball card got. So you could say, oh, they graded 100 PSA 9, so you know that at least 100 of them exist in the world. WATA has not provided this information out there, and frankly, this is to the detriment of the community, I believe. because we should know how many of these games exist, how many of them have graded. We know they're backed up. We know that there's a lot of games that they've taken in that haven't come back yet. And we know that they've graded a bunch of Mario 64s. They've even admitted it. I believe somebody recently said, this is Dennis Kahn from WADA, this is according to an article I read, we often receive factory case packs of N64 games where all 6 copies included have not been circulated. Even in these undistributed case-fresh copies, most often the results end up with 2 or fewer 9.8s, and oftentimes none. So, regardless of the Mario 64 thing, they are getting other graded games in. And they say we are getting some other 9.8s. Maybe not all of them, but in a case of 6, if they're getting even one 9.8, there's a good chance that there are many more Mario 64 9.8s out there. So we don't know this because WADA hasn't provided a population report. And honestly, I don't think I would buy something where I didn't actually know the rarity of it. I mentioned this before. It only takes one person to set a price they're willing to pay. Let's say a very rich person out there said, you know what, I want to buy this Mario 64 for $500,000, but I've got a ton of money, I'm really willing to spend anything. And one other guy is willing to bid it up, and they think it's a $1 million plus game. That's how these things get more expensive. Everybody else on the sideline, people like me, average people, even higher end game collectors who aren't going to do this, they don't have to have an opinion. They don't have to think it's worth that much if 2 people want to do it. Another thing I wrote down in my notes here, and I don't know if this is accurate enough, is there may be some sketchy stuff going on. I mean, I don't have evidence to say this, but it is strange that we don't know who bought it or who sold it. We don't know how it's been paid for or where it's going into the world. We don't know if any of the people are necessarily connected to Heritage or WADA. And I'm not saying that these things are happening, but when a company is so non-transparent about their dealings, I think it's fair to say we need more answers about it. You could also do criminal things with this. I mean, let's say you wanted to launder money or do something like that. There are probably schemes that you could do to do these things. I'm not saying that happened here, but I'm saying it's something that could be done. So what's my advice to people, and what do I think should be done? First, the population reports have to happen. Sealed games that sell at these high prices, until we know how many of them are, it's going to start pulling the prices of other games up. And now you're going to start seeing people go after just regular sealed games and try to inflate the value of them, regardless of rarity. And I think if we had a population report showing exactly how many games there are in these conditions that have been graded by these companies, maybe the rush for people to go to Walmart and buy 10 copies of Pokemon Ultra Sun or Ultra Moon would tamper a little bit. These seem to be very speculative things. If you're holding one of these games, like a sealed popular IP game, say it's a sealed Pokemon Yellow that you've gotten graded by WADA, or a sealed Mario, or a sealed Zelda, or whatever it is, on an 8 or 16-bit era, or maybe even the 32-bit era thing, and it's in good shape, I would get it graded and I would sell it right away. No hesitation whatsoever. This sort of thing we're talking about is life-changing money. And if you could take a game that you have in your collection, and I don't care what your emotional attachment is to it, but if you can take a game in your collection, especially one that I believe is quite common, and you can get money that can be a down payment on a house or pay off your college education or do any number of things for your family, you should be doing that. We need to have priorities in our life, and one of those priorities needs to be doing the right thing with our money. Games are not the right thing to do with your money. More about that in a moment. I'd be very reluctant to grade other games. So let's say you have a sealed copy of Crash. Well, maybe that's not a great example. You have a sealed copy of a Lego Star Wars on the GameCube, right? This is not an expensive game sealed, I imagine. I hope I'm wrong on that, or I'm right on that, and I'm not, don't look like an idiot, but I don't think it's a very expensive sealed game. I would be very hesitant to take the game, buy it sealed, grade it, and do anything other than sell it right away. Don't buy something like that, grade it, seal it, and then say, you know what? I'm holding on to this Lego Star Wars on GameCube for the next 20 years, and 20 years from now, somebody's going to pay me for it. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think 20 years from now, maybe the Marios will still be valuable, or the Final Fantasies, or the truly collectible rare items, but I'm not sure about these lower tier games. Um, I wrote in my notes, I'm very curious about the scrutiny WADA and VGA will get in the future, but as of the time of this recording, I believe WADA is being acquired by the same company that runs PSA. So I think we're going to see more about video game grading and transparency in the future as these other companies get involved. The last thing I want to talk about is preservation. I hear sometimes people talk about this is a way to preserve games. I don't agree with that. We can preserve games without grading them. If we want to preserve games, we should be working with people, and like Frank Cifaldi and those who do preservation. I'll put some links and some images up here. These are the people who preserve games and make them accessible to all, just like the Smithsonian is a place where we preserve pieces of history or other museums. You don't have to put games in a slab and throw them on eBay to preserve them. You just keep taking care of the game is enough to preserve them. Not just that, most games don't need this kind of crazy preservation. We've preserved Mario 64. I think it's safe to say that we're going to have a copy of Mario 64 into the future for future generations. I don't think preservation really applies there. The Nintendo PlayStation needs to be preserved. The Nintendo World Championship carts, those need to be preserved. Prototype games, they need to be preserved. Obscure systems, even rarer games, like a Panzer Dragoon Saga or maybe a Lunar or whatever, these very hard to find games, they should definitely be preserved. And I could understand the grading and certifying of those games. But an average game, I just don't buy the grading as a preservation thing. The last thing I want to talk about in this video, and I know I've been going a while, so I hope you're really sticking with me and enjoying it, is the concept of games as an investment. So, first of all, they are a bad investment. Do not go out and purchase games new today, especially, and put them in a closet and expect them in 20 years to be worth more than you paid. Most games start off at $60, and that in a couple years they're worth practically nothing, and then maybe over time some of them start to peak back up. Even the games that people tend to like to buy at retro game stores, again, Crash Bandicoot is a great example. I mean, the game's $20. So even in inflation adjusted terms, that's even less than what it was worth back then after it crashed from its from its new peak. And most games are like that. Only some games get more valuable over time. There are a handful of games like Klonoa and Suikoden and Lunar and some of these sealed games that go up quite a bit over time, but most games do not. And most of these games are produced in the millions of copies, so don't do it. Not only that, games are not a good investment vehicle. You should be investing in smart investments and talk to smart people about where you should put your money for retirement and other things in your life. Things like owning your own home, maybe. I don't want to get into real estate too much, but I own my own home, and there's benefits to me in terms of my investments. The stock market, your 401k, retirement, precious metals, even some other kinds of collectibles. There's justifications for these kinds of investments. To me, games are a fun hobby, and if I make a little money on it, if something happens, it's all gravy. It's wonderful for me. What a wonderful treat for me at the end of that my hobby was able to produce something financially beneficial for me. But they should not be looked at as an investment. In fact, I don't even count them when I'm thinking about things like my retirement funds or where my money goes at the end of the day. If you are concerned about these things in investment, you should consider insuring them. I'm also going to talk about the idea of games as investments as opposed to emotional items. So there comes a point, one of the things I like about game collecting for me personally is that I am able to keep it relatively inexpensive. I do have a few expensive games, but I don't have any game individually that if it were to get lost in a fire or someone stole it, that I wouldn't be able to lose my sleep at night. And I feel good about that because I don't have to think about them as wealth containers. My 401k, I have no emotional connection to it. When I do things with it, I don't have to think about whether I'm going to miss my 401k or something like that. It's just a retirement fund. I wouldn't feel the same way about my Castlevania Dracula X or my Suikoden 2 or any of my other really games that I love in my collection if I was so focused on the value of them. There are a lot of other opportunities as well to get some really rare games that are much cheaper right now. You don't have to, if you do want to maybe speculate and bet a little bit and gamble or resell or whatever you want to call it with video games. You can do it on a much smaller scale in a much safer way. You can go to yard sales and flea markets and flip things, and maybe once in a while you get a lucky payday like I did with that Fortnite, and you find something super cheap and you make a good amount of money, and then you can take that money that you made and you can say, you know what, I'm going to put that towards my retirement, or I'm going to put that towards paying down my bills or something like that. The last thing I'm gonna say, and this is gonna be maybe the most judgmental thing in the whole video, is there are people out there who what their collection is I only collect, my entire game collection is sealed, graded WATA games. And look at me, I'm in my nice little fancy boardroom, and I have all these games lined up, and here's this version of Mario that I paid this hundreds of thousands of dollars for, and there's this version of Mario that I paid this hundreds of thousands of dollars for. And isn't this great? And then when you talk to them about it, they say, well, I'd only sell it if I got this much for it. To me, these people, I'm going to say these people are not, they don't actually love video games. If they did, they would do different things. Or if they went for the graded stuff, they would also go for the non-graded stuff, for the lower end, more regular items. Even items that are worth $1,000 they could go for. But the truth is, they don't love video games. They're buying these because it's something to show off, something that they could maybe flip and make money on in the future. They're trading this like they trade art. I just don't think it's about game collecting when you get to that point. I will never go to that point. It's why I don't collect sealed games. It's why I don't get, if any game that I ever had got to the point where it needed to be graded, I would end up selling it, because that's just not my relationship with games, and I think for the average person, you shouldn't think of them that way either. That was a long rant. I hope you guys liked it. If you didn't, you can feel free to hit the dislike button, but I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button instead. I don't know if we have new people watching this, because this is a different type of video for me, but I usually do a lot of game collecting, pickups, advice videos, etc. You can see my game tours, whatever. Please leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Am I wrong about this? Did I get something off the mark? Should I be looking at this differently? You know, I'm open to people who disagree with me. I mean, that's totally fine. It doesn't matter to me at all. I'm also trying to get my subscribers up. So as of this recording, I think it's 744 subscribers. I really appreciate everybody who tunes in for all the videos, comes back for more, subscribes to the channel. It's really helpful for me. Would love to have more people join the channel. Anyway, that's it. Be safe out there. Take care and have a great day. Bye-bye.